The kingdom's greatest disaster wasn't war or famine, it was the illness of a princess. People from every corner of the land had tried everything to save her. The palace had summoned doctors, scholars, even sorcerers, one after another, but none of them could cure the deadly sickness that gripped her. One morning, just before sunrise, the princess lay in the highest room of the palace, pale and motionless. She rested on a bed where the first light of day slipped through the window. The royal family stood by in silence. People across the kingdom held their breath. You could see it in their eyes, the same fear. If the princess died, the whole kingdom would fall apart. Everything they knew, everything they believed in, would crumble. So they prayed. In every village, every home, they begged the gods to save her. But none of it seemed to matter. Nothing changed. The helplessness only grew heavier. Then, one evening, the king made a choice, a desperate one. He decided to summon the only person who might still have a chance of saving her. Before the last candle in the palace could burn out, he called for a man whose name had once struck fear into every heart, Alaric, a wizard long thought to be gone, a shadow from the past. Alaric wasn't just any wizard. His name was wrapped in mystery, in whispers of darkness. Some believed he had the power to reshape lives. Others said he dealt in forbidden magic and brought nothing but destruction. But the king didn't care about the rumors anymore. He was desperate, and Alaric was his last hope. So, in the middle of the night, Alaric was brought to the palace. The king made sure it was done in secret. And when the wizard stepped through the gates, wrapped in the cold night air, he could feel it, the weight in the air, the silence in the halls, the fear. It all felt familiar, like returning to a story he once left behind. The king welcomed him without ceremony. Alaric didn't look at the gold or the grandeur of the palace. He didn't come for any of that. He had one purpose, and he knew it. Together, the king and the wizard made their way to the highest tower, where the princess lay. She hadn't moved in days. As Alaric stood at her bedside, he took a deep breath. He wasn't just here to save a life. Another was something more, a chance. But taking that chance would come at a cost. A heavy one. "Wizard," the king said, his hands trembling. "My daughter must live. Do whatever it takes. I can't lose her." Alaric had already made up his mind. The kingdom's rules may have drawn limits around his craft, but saving a life came before all of that. "I know this won't be easy, Your Majesty," he said, his voice steady and firm. "But I have hope. I believe I can save her." The king gave a solemn nod. "Then do what you must." As Alaric stepped closer to the princess's bedside, he took a deep breath. All the tension inside the palace seemed to fade away. There was no one else in that moment. Just Alaric, the king, and the faint breath of the sleeping princess. The wizard closed his hands, centering his focus. His eyes held a quiet resolve. This spell would save her life, but it would also give her a power she never asked for. He began to chant, his voice rising slightly. The words were from an ancient tongue, forgotten by most. They echoed like old whispers, bouncing off the stone walls. A subtle tremor moved through the palace. And far beyond the room, throughout the kingdom, people felt it, a strange, sudden pulse, like the wind had shifted. Light started to shimmer in Alaric's eyes. That glow wasn't just magic, it was the end of death, the beginning of something else. A new fate. At first, nothing happened, but then her pale skin started to gain color. Her body stirred as something awakened inside her. And when her eyes opened, the entire atmosphere in the room changed. The princess had returned from her deep sleep, but there was something different in her gaze. She wasn't the same. The spell had worked, yes, but it had left something behind. A gift, or maybe a curse. Time would tell. Alaric bowed his head and let out a slow breath. He hadn't just saved her, he had given her something far greater, and far more dangerous. Be careful, he thought to himself. But right then, no one else knew. No one but the princess, who had already begun to change. She opened her eyes wider and looked at him. Then, with a soft smile, she said, "Thank you." Her voice echoed through the room, deeper than before. Alaric nodded once. "You're alive. But you carry power now, and power always comes with a cost." He turned to the king. "From here on, you must be careful. Time is about to shift for your kingdom." The king exhaled in relief. "Then all is well with my daughter," he said, but even he couldn't quite silence the unease stirring inside him. As Alaric walked out of the room, he made himself a promise. This power would ripple across the kingdom. Whatever had awakened inside the princess, it wouldn't stay hidden for long. And this was just the beginning. After saving the princess, Alaric chose to stay within the palace walls for a while. He didn't leave right away, something kept him there. Something stronger than duty. A bond had formed between them. It went against the kingdom's laws and defied every tradition the people held sacred, but neither Alaric nor the princess cared. While he remained in the palace, he stayed close to her. He had to. Deep down, he knew his work wasn't done. The princess's power was still growing, and with it came a threat not just to herself, but to the entire kingdom, and that thought haunted him. She had been pulled back from the brink of death, given immortality, but that gift came with a price. The change that followed, it wasn't natural. The power inside her had awakened something dark. Her body was stronger, sure, but it wasn't just strength. The energy flowing through her was twisting her from the inside out. It was turning her into something else. There was a new look in her eyes, cold, distant. When she was with Alaric, she seemed more and more like a stranger. Something foreign had taken root in her soul. That foreign force was slowly taking control. Day by day, it grew bolder. People in the kingdom started to notice. They saw the change in their princess, and their fear turned to anger. Whispers about the wizard grew louder. The kingdom's oldest and most respected advisors, those who had spent years trying to heal the princess, couldn't ignore what she'd become. Immortality through magic had broken nature's balance, and they knew it. One day, the king sought counsel from an old wise man who lived near the river. The man looked the king in the eye and said, "Stay away from her. She's no longer the one you knew." But the king couldn't let the wizard leave. He knew the cost of the magic that had saved his daughter couldn't be undone. Alaric had to stay. The princess's power, dangerous as it was, had become essential to the kingdom's survival, and Alaric felt it too. Each day, he watched her slip further away. He spent sleepless nights climbing to the top of the palace tower, gazing up at the stars. The stars reminded him that everything was temporary, but they also whispered a truth he couldn't ignore. The magic was still alive, and it was waking up something dark inside her. One evening, Alaric found the princess walking alone in the grand garden of the palace. There was something strange in her eyes, a shimmer, like some unseen force was guiding her from the shadows. When she noticed him, a faint smile appeared on her lips. But there was something about that smile that made Alaric's chest tighten. "Alaric," she said softly, "something changed in me again today. It's like the old me is gone. I can feel it, and this power this thing inside met scares me." Alaric could see it clearly now. Her innocence was fading. Slowly, silently, he stepped closer. "This power," he said gently, "it's starting to take hold of you. You need to be careful. Controlling it won't be easy." She looked away, quiet for a moment. "I know, but strangely, it brings me peace. I don't fear it. It comforts me." Alaric tried to hide the worry in his voice. "Then, let it in, if you must. But remember, every power has a price. Even for you, that price might be too high." But the light in her eyes only grew brighter. That evening, as they made their way back inside the palace halls, the kingdom was already stirring with unrest. One of the elder leaders had started to speak out against the wizard. He had noticed the shift in the princess and blamed Alaric for it. Whispers turned to anger. In the deepest corners of the palace, fear became focus. The king's closest advisors began to meet in secret. In one of the oldest rooms in the palace, a hushed voice said, "This can't go on. The wizard can't control what's inside her. If we do nothing, he'll bring ruin to the kingdom." Others agreed. They believed Alaric was dangerous, that the princess's power, unnatural and growing stronger, would bring disaster if left unchecked. When the king heard of it, a deep helplessness settled over him. He was starting to fear not just for his daughter, but for his throne. The next day, as the princess walked through the grand hall of the palace, a group of advisors watched her closely. Alaric appeared beside her, and she turned to him with a troubled look. "Wizard," she said quietly, "the people, they look at me like I'm a stranger. I can feel it. They think I'm dangerous." Alaric placed a calming hand on her shoulder. "Remember, there's a power inside you, princess, and only you can control it. But understand this, people will resist that change. They only knew the version of you that came before. This new power, it makes you feel like a stranger to them." A flicker of sadness crossed her eyes, but beneath it was something stronger resolve. "So I have to fight it, don't I?" she asked. After a long pause, Alaric nodded. "Yes, but the real fight isn't against others. It's in mastering the power within you, learning how to guide it before it guides you." And in that moment, everything began to shift. The balance of the kingdom started to unravel. The very presence of the wizard, combined with the power rising inside the princess, threw everything into chaos. The people no longer trusted Alaric. Whispers turned to rejection. He was being pushed out, shut out entirely. Inside the palace, a different battle was unfolding. The princess, caught between the force growing inside her and the wisdom Alaric offered, struggled to understand who she was becoming. But with each passing day, the power inside her kept changing her bit by bit, moment by moment. As time passed, the princess's power continued to echo through the palace. Day by day, the darkness inside her became harder to ignore. Alaric tried to spend more time with her, but every moment he did, he could feel the change in her eyes grow stronger. The unrest in the kingdom deepened. Whispers about the wizard and the princess, about the bond between them, spread like wildfire. The king saw it all, but he had no idea how to stop it. Alaric was determined to protect her with everything he had, but deep down, he feared what that protection might cost. Could saving her bring about the kingdom's downfall? One evening, one of the kingdom's most respected advisors stood up and spoke plainly. Alaric's magic had gone too far. He had crossed lines no wizard should ever cross. And somehow, someday, he would pay for it. The kingdom's trust was fading, fast. Even the king had begun to question his faith in Alaric. Things had changed. The princess's power wasn't just strange anymore, was dangerous. That night, in the hidden garden of the palace, the wizard and the princess met under a cold sky. Her eyes, locked on his, no longer held any trace of the innocence they once did. What replaced it was something darker, something glowing. Alaric stepped closer. This much power, it can consume you, and if you lose control, the kingdom won't survive it. She looked down, silent for a moment, then a light flickered in her eyes. You know I trust you, she said quietly. But this power doesn't control me. It strengthens me. I have a purpose now. I'm going to use it to save the people. That's what a true princess should do. Alaric took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. To save the people, you have to save yourself first. If this power fills the emptiness inside you, it could pull you into something you can't come back from. She looked straight into his eyes. I understand that, but giving up this power would mean giving up who I am now. If I'm weak, I can't protect them, and that would leave them even more vulnerable. And in that moment, Alaric could feel either words weren't just strong. They were certain, but that night, things inside the palace took a much darker turn. One of the kingdom's oldest and most respected advisors, a man named Jarek, finally spoke out. He had served the royal family for decades, and he now believed the bond between the wizard and the princess had crossed a line that couldn't be ignored. He began voicing his concerns loudly. Others joined him, claiming Alaric's presence was shaking the very foundation of the kingdom. The people were growing restless, too. Fear of the wizard and the princess's rising power had started to spread like fire. Unease was turning into panic. Jarek and his fellow advisors began to craft a plan. They were convinced the only way to rid the kingdom of the darkness was to remove its source, and that meant forcing Alaric out of the palace. They believed that without him, the princess might be able to gain control of her power. But what they didn't realize was that removing him could have the opposite effect. It could push her over the edge. One night, as Alaric moved through the quieter halls of the palace, he overheard whispers behind closed doors. He heard the tones, the names, the talk of strategies. They were planning something involving the princess's power, something that could only end in betrayal. Heart pounding, he rushed up the staircase toward the highest part of the palace. With each step, a storm of doubt and dread swirled inside him. He knew what was coming. He knew this wasn't just fear anymore. It was war. If the power inside the princess broke loose, it would destroy everything. He reached her door and flung it open. Her eyes met his immediately, glowing with that same haunting light. But this time, it didn't carry fear, it carried acceptance. She knew what was coming. Alaric stepped inside, arms slightly raised, his voice low but steady. You know what this means, don't you? The war, it's already begun. The princess was quiet for a moment. Then she said, yes, the war is coming, and I intend to win it. In that moment, something shifted. A new era began to take root within the palace walls. One of the kingdom's highest powers had officially turned against the wizard. Alaric and the princess now stood together alone, against a growing force. The king and his advisors were gaining influence by the day, tightening their grip and building strength against Alaric. But the wizard refused to back down. He was committed whatever it took to protect her. Without him, the power inside the princess would only become more volatile, more dangerous. As days passed, the bond between them grew stronger and more dangerous. Alaric could feel either power wasn't just a risk to the kingdom anymore. It was a threat to both of them. Yet even with that knowledge, he stood by her, guarding her, guiding her, trying to keep the storm inside her from consuming everything. But the scent of betrayal hung heavy in the air. And this was only the beginning. The kingdom, after months of unrest, was now facing its greatest test. The power inside the princess had grown so intense, its presence could be felt in every corner of the palace. Fear gripped the people. Their hatred for the wizard had only deepened after the princess gained immortality. One of the oldest royal advisors made the decision to have Alaric removed from the palace. The king hesitated. He knew that forcing Alaric and the princess to confront this power alone might bring even greater danger. But one thing was now clear. The bond between them wasn't just about the two of them anymore. It was shaping the fate of the entire kingdom. As Alaric entered the princess's chamber, a storm raged outside the palace walls. Across the land, people were spiraling into panic, swept up in the fear of this great shift. Inside the room, Alaric looked into her eyes again, and what he saw wasn't innocence. Not anymore. That old softness had vanished. What remained was something deep and powerful, something barely contained. He stepped closer and drew in a slow breath. "Princess," he said, "the kingdom sees us as a threat now. This is the end. As long as we stay together, it'll only get harder to control what's inside you." The princess paused, but then something sharp and certain lit up in her eyes. "But Alaric, don't you see? We can control it together. We're stronger when we're not alone. You have to believe that." For a moment he hesitated. The light in her eyes, the power radiating from Herit, had grown beyond anything he'd imagined. He had spent every waking moment trying to help her hold on to it, but now this was no longer just a struggle between them. It had become a battle that would decide the kingdom's future. "We can't control this," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "If the kingdom keeps seeing you like this, they'll turn on you. We might lose you, and we can't afford to lose what you are. We have to protect the future, princess, even if it means stepping back." She looked at him in silence. In that moment, she thought of the kingdom, of what might happen to the people if she lost control. She felt the pull of the power within, Herit's weight, its hunger. But she also knew Alaric was right. This wasn't just about strength. Still, she wasn't ready to give up. "I know," she said at last, "but I have to do something. I can't just stand by while the kingdom falls apart. I need to use this power to save them, and I want to do it with you, Alaric, together." The wizard could no longer resist her words. He had already chosen to help her, but he also knew it would come at a heavy cost. The kingdom's most powerful advisors had seen enough. They were ready to bring this connection between the princess and the wizard to an end. But Alaric wasn't ready to let go. They had to fight together. They had to save the kingdom together. That evening, the palace doors were thrown open. The kingdom's leaders gathered to pass judgment on the wizard and the princess. But she stood beside him, unwavering, ready, strong. She wouldn't let him face this alone. The king entered the grand hall with his advisors behind him. People from all across the land filled the space, drawn to witness what was about to unfold. The king fixed his gaze on them and said, "This relationship cannot continue. For the safety of the kingdom, the wizard must be banished." Alaric stepped forward, steady, calm. "Yes," he said, "there's a price I must pay for what's happened, but I'm the only one who can help her control the power inside her. I won't abandon her. I know how dangerous it is." The princess turned to him, her voice firm. "We have to face this together. It's the only way. This power, it only works when we share it." Alaric gripped her hand, drawing strength from her presence. "Then we'll face it, side by side. Whatever comes, I won't lose you, princess." And in that moment, before the eyes of the kingdom, the bond between them became something undeniable, something unshakable. The hall fell silent. Even those who came to condemn them paused. Everything had changed, and slowly the kingdom began to shift with it. The people saw what was happening. Not just rebellion, not just danger, but a new beginning. A love powerful enough to reshape destiny. Together, the wizard and the princess stepped beyond the palace walls, ready to build a new life. The power inside her was no longer hers, alone it was theirs. And what they would create would go beyond the old laws, beyond the limits of the past. But the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Their journey would demand sacrifice, and they were ready to face it together. Days passed, and Alaric and the princess vanished from the eyes of the people, disappearing into the distant lands beyond the kingdom. The old order had crumbled behind them, and in its place, something new had begun to rise. The kingdom no longer chased them. The king had let go of his daughter. In this new world, love, Power and freedom could exist side by side, but the path ahead demanded great sacrifice from them both. The strength of their love would lead them somewhere neither of them could have ever predicted. And in the end, Alaric and the princess would come to understand what it truly meant to be free, what it meant to belong to no one but each other. One thing, however, was certain. The kingdom, as it once was, no longer existed. Now, a new age had begun, one shaped by their bond, their choices, and their power. And this new age belonged to them. Thank you for joining us on this journey through love, power, and sacrifice. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to African Folk Tales, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new tale. Your support helps us keep these stories alive. See you in the next chapter.